I see this object that's about a 30-degree incline over the horizon, and I thought, what's that? That doesn't look like any star I've seen. And it fluctuated, and it was a little different tint to any light that I'd ever seen. Watched it for a while, and it really didn't move, but the light glimmered. So I just walked inside and flipped the facility lights, which I think there was about 12 or 14 big canned facility lights on all corners of the building and 2 on the fence lines. And it was all operated by one switch in the flight security controller's office. Pretty sure it was Bill Holloman, flight security controller on duty at the time. And I walked in, I said, hey, Bill, come check this out. But he was on the phone talking to his wife. He just kind of waved me off. So I just did what I wanted to do and flipped the light 6 or 8 times. Well,
in other words, you were thinking it's some kind of joke, and you are flipping the lights to reply to whatever the blinking lights are.
Yeah. My thinking was, like ships at sea, that prairie, there's nothing else out there north of Newell, South Dakota. So I just flipped the light 6 or 8 times and walked back out there. And the light flipped a little bit, it changed its intensity, and all of a sudden the damn thing went out. And I just stood there. I went, what the hell? And all of a sudden it came back on. It just flipped back on, just like it flipped off and flipped back on. And I went, well, that's weird. I said, let's have some fun with this. I walked back in the office, and I said, man, you got to come check this out. Damn things flipped the light off at me. And I flipped my lights again 6 or 8 times. Same sequence. Walked outside, and it was off. Then all of a sudden, at about the same degree elevation, 30 degrees on the horizon, it was more north. When I came back outside, it was gone, or it was off. And then all of a sudden, at about the 1 o'clock position, boom, it just beamed back on. And I go, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
It's moving.
Yeah, it moved. It just moved in darkness. They imitate planets. And that's what it was doing. And I just happened to see it. So I go inside and I said, Michael, and I barely knew the guy's name. It's the first time we'd worked together, Michael Johnson. He outranked me. Anyway, I said, man, you got to come check this out. What? He was watching some TV, one of 3 channels. So I went back outside. He didn't come out for a few minutes, and I'm out there watching this thing. And it went off again for about a minute or 2. And I'm just really perplexed and kind of laughing to myself. I said, it's got to be helicopters. But I've never seen anything that bright do that kind of thing. The intensity of it was just different light than I can even explain.
What color would you say the light was?
Had a red, white, orange tint to it. So anyway, it pops back on. Michael Johnson comes out, and I said, hey, check that thing out, man. I said, I flipped the lights at it. It started out over here, then it went out, and I flipped the lights at it again. It went out, and then it reappeared over here about 3 o'clock to about the 1 o'clock position. He just looked at me like I was a fool. He was a Chicago boy. And I'm a Southern boy. And lo and behold, the damn thing went out. And he just said something like, whatever, man. And he walked back inside. And this started at about 9:30. It'd gone off and on twice, at least, maybe the 3rd time. And I'd flipped the lights at it about 4 times. As I'm standing there, it goes off. He goes back in, and I waited, and nothing happened. And it's about 10:15 now. And went back in, and I think I picked up a book, and I started watching some TV, or something. I guess it was about 12:15, 12:20. And all of a sudden, the MCC phone went off. And the phone, when it rang at the flight security controller's office, it was a direct line. So what it did is it went until you picked it up. There was no ringing or anything like that. That's what it did. So the lawman picked it up and said, yes, sir. He says, yeah, we've got a SIT 4 at November 5. Well, a SIT 4 is a pretty serious alarm, and you don't have them very often. What that is an inner zone penetration of the alarm system, which are the 3 antenna array that's around and on top of the site. And then the C plug is the inner zone alarm on a SIT 4.
Does SIT 4 stand for situation?
That is correct. It stands for Situation 4.
You are northwest of Rapid City by about how far?
55 miles.
There were these crews down below.
Yes.
In the missile silos, and you get a call from who?
It was the commander of the launch control facility, and he's underground directly under our feet at the launch control facility, which would have been November 1, as all of the LCS, launch control facilities, which there was 15 of them at Ellsworth, all surrounding areas from the Badlands all the way north to spearfish and sturgeon, South Dakota. So there was 150 missiles total, all spread out in all different areas. The flight security controller, who picked the phone up as it was buzzing directly behind him, relayed that there was a SIT-4 in progress, and it was at November 5, which happened to be the closest nuclear weapons silo closest to the November 1 launch facility.
Which is where you were.
Correct.
And when you heard this information, did you think this has something to do with that light that's been going on and off that I've been blinking at?
I didn't at that point. Well, damn, a SIT-4, we hadn't been here but 12 hours, and our first alarm is a SIT-4, which was pretty unusual. Usually didn't happen. I guess as the crow flies, November 5 is only about 7 to 8 miles directly away from the missile site, but of course we had to proceed down these clay roads, which are almost state highways in the Dakotas that are maintained extremely well. We proceeded toward Highway 79. A lot of the highways are built up high for the runoff of water and snow in the wintertime. And as we approached Highway 79, it was up higher than the clay road we were coming off of. And as I looked over to my right, as I'm the passenger in the vehicle, I'm looking out the window, and I looked to my right at about the 4 o'clock position as we were coming up to Highway 79, and I see this real bright glow from real low on the horizon over by November 5. So that would have been, 7 to 8 miles that I was seeing this glow, kind of like when you approach a large city at night and you see the glow from the city. It was like that. And I looked at Michael Johnson. I said, "Hey, man," I said, "I think that object is over there at November 5. I said, "I'm telling you, look at that. Where else have you seen light in Newell, South Dakota like that?" Because at 6 o'clock, they roll the sidewalks up. Literally, there's one stop sign and one stoplight on Highway 79 in Newell, South Dakota. That's it. So the next city south is Sturgis. As we get on 79, now it's moved from that 4 o'clock position. As we're going dead south, now it's at the 2 o'clock position. And as we go downhill toward Newell, which is about 7 or 8 miles to the stop sign, it's Orman Road, O-R-M-A-N, and we turn right at the stop sign. I kept waiting to see it. I was kind of excited and scared at the same time. We go down about a mile and a quarter, and then that hardtop road drops back off on the clay, and it doglegs over to the left. And Linda, when we rounded that corner, this object was sitting on top of November 5. It looked like a mini sun. And honestly, the size of this thing was, the only comparison that I've said to people was the size of a super Walmart center, sitting 10 feet above the ground, right on top of November 5. And it was so bright, it was as if it was a sun sitting there.
Did it have color?
Yes, it was red, orange, and white. There were no hard edges. There were no surface features that I could see. There were no wings. There was no portals, no areas for propulsion. There was nothing like that whatsoever. We rolled up to the cattle gate, which is built in the ground, not a gate you had to open. And we stopped there at a 45-degree angle like we were going to do something. What could we do? Literally, we sat right at the end of that cattle gate road in a tactical position, both frozen in what we were doing. We just couldn't move. I mean, the light got so bright, I could almost see through my hands. It was so bright. I had to close my eyes because the dashboard, everything in that vehicle was lit up, just like that movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when that mailbox scene.
Right.
It was like that. And then the atmosphere started evacuating after. The light never stopped, but all of a sudden we couldn't breathe. And it was as if somebody sucked all the air out of the area or out of the cab of that truck. I've never experienced anything like it. The only thing that I could do to get relief, and I knew I had to ask, was I rolled down that passenger window of that F-154 pickup truck, dark blue, U.S. Air Force Security Police on the side of it in letters. And we had those stainless steel Western-style large mirrors on the side of our truck. And I took my mag light and I pulled myself with my right hand out onto the windowsill of that vehicle. And why I did that, I don't know. But I grabbed the blue bubbles that were on top of the vehicle with my left hand, and I had a mitten on. And I reached across with my right hand, and I flashed this object in the same sequence, I guess, that I did back at the LCF with my mag light. Blink, 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 blink. And I did that a couple of times, and I was, in my mind, I was asking for relief of this pressure, of this, whatever this was. which I can't describe. And then I just slinked down into that seat. And I'm a pretty good-sized fella in really good shape. And I remember putting my weapon between my knees. I just knew I had to secure it for some reason. I don't know why. I don't even know where my flashlight went, but I just dropped my head, and then I was out. And my last thing was I looked at Michael Johnson, and he was frozen looking straight ahead on the steering wheel. He was just looking straight out the front window. I guess I lifted my head up a couple of times, and I seen this black sphere bobbing in front of the truck like a beach ball, maybe a little bit larger than a beach ball, but it had these little vents all over it. It was like it was in layers. It was like a beach ball with lines on it, and in the middle of those lines, there was nothing there.
Not glowing any light.
All black. I just remember that bobbing in front of the windshield real fast, real quick. As I dropped my head, I kept sensing or feeling something, do not fear. Do not fear is what I kept hearing. And I just kind of rotated my head to the right. It was as if I was in tunnel vision, and I see these little beings about 10 feet away from the vehicle coming toward me, and they've got little uniforms on. They had large heads, but not big bulbous heads. They did have large eyes. Behind them was a tall one, and he was more menacing. That's the one I centered on, and I felt fear from that one.
What did you see in the tall one?
Well, large eyes, just a bigger, meaner rendition of the two that were in front of him by a couple of feet. He was like coming up behind them. He was probably 2 foot taller than the ones in front of him.
What would be the height of the small and the large?
The tall one, probably 5.5, maybe 6 foot. And then the ones in front of him were about 4.5.
And what color uniforms were the small ones in?
They were in like a gray uniform. The one on the right, he had a belt. On the one that was on the left, he had this rod in his belt, and it had a tip that looked like a pencil, but it was glowing, and it was glowing yellow.
Did he grab it in his hand?
I never saw that. But the one behind him, he had something in the center of his chest. It was pulsating that same glow, that same color. And it was the size of your palm in the middle of his chest. It had a glow to it. It got brighter and dimmer.
What color on Earth would match the color of the glow from the taller being's chest?
Cross between orange and white. Tangerine, perhaps?
Was it glowing with a whitish light?
Yes, with a whitish light. And it wasn't super bright. It was dull, but it was that tint. When I looked at that and I kept hearing, do not fear, it was not words I was hearing because the windows were up. It was inside of me. They talked as if it was in water or something coming through me, like I could hear it inside my eardrums without any noise from outside whatsoever.
Thought words in your own mind. And what was the tall one wearing?
He had on a similar uniform, but it was different. It was belted, and it was more of a darker gray color. It's hard to look at anything else but the eyes. And the face of the tall one was different than the face of the two smaller ones. The face of the tall one was more of a rugged, more threatening type of look. Cheekbones were different, raised higher, jawline was much thinner and protruded differently, versus the smaller ones had more rounded features, even though they had larger eyes. And I can't remember the exact lengths of their arms, because as they walked, their arms weren't directly at their side. Their hands were in front of them, and they were three-fingered, 3 fingers and a thumb.
Did the taller one have scales like a reptilian?
No, did not. And the skin color was not gray. It was kind of a light blue gray, almost not an aqua, but a teal.
And we now have drawings of these teal blue beings. You're showing that this existed back in 1977, even if people weren't saying that they were looking at teal blue beings.
Wow, I had no idea.
Okay, now, are you aware that you are passing out? What happens inside?
It's as if I'm in tunnel vision and I'm allowed to see what I'm seeing, because I remember going completely dark and questioning my mind and everything about my existence ever. Everything. I mean, it all flashes in front of you, like loss of my father, my mother, just everything that was happening. It all came to me in one flash.
Mario, are you saying that you had something like a life review sitting in that military truck with this gigantic UFO and these extraterrestrial biological entities approaching you, that you were given through your mind's eye like a movie of a life review?
I've never looked at it that way, but yes, that's what it had to be. Really, it just shook me to my core. And it was so fast. I mean, I didn't think thought it could move that fast. It was just so strange to have this tunnel vision, as if I was fighting to not close my eyes, but yet somehow being told to close my eyes. And I kept hearing over and over again, do not fear, do not fear. We are not going to hurt you. Do not fear.
Today in 2021, September, as we are talking, do you have any more evolved information or knowledge about why the tall being and the shorter beings would have run through your life in your mind's eye at Ellsworth Air Force Base when they had a huge UFO over a missile site?
I really don't know. It was just being either at the right place at the wrong time or the wrong place at the right time. It did not end there, and it continued on.
What happened?
Well, I'd have memories. I remember somehow or another they got me out of that truck. I was on my back, and I remember lifting up my head 3 or 4 feet above the ground as if I was on a stretcher, being moved or something. And I still had no contact, or I had no thoughts of Michael Johnson, knowing that he was in that vehicle, still staring forward with this blank stare in his eye. And the next thing that I remember is being in something dark and cold, and it felt like a jello or something. And I felt completely alone. I had no idea where or what was going on. And a feeling of dread came upon me, and it really, really, really upset me.